The desert wind cuts like a blade across the steel hull of the tank. It howls through broken stone and burned-out villages, carrying sand that grinds against metal like distant gunfire. Inside the turret, Sergeant Daniel Hayes wipes sweat from his brow. Though the air is cold, it is always cold before something begins. March 1942, somewhere far from the maps printed in Washington, a place few back home could find, and fewer would understand. Engine steady, mutters Corporal Lewis from below, his voice tight. But she won't like this sand much longer. Hayes doesn't answer right away. He leans into the periscope, scanning the horizon. Nothing but dunes. Endless, empty dunes until they aren't. A flicker, movement. His jaw tightens. Stop, Hayes orders. The tank lurches, tracks grinding into the earth. Silence falls inside, broken only by the ticking engine and the faint whistle of wind outside. What is it? Private Nolan asks, barely above a whisper. Hayes watches again. They're just beyond a ridge. Shadows where there should be none. Too straight, too deliberate. Armor, he says finally. Not ours. The word hangs heavy. They weren't supposed to meet resistance here. This was meant to be reconnaissance. Quiet, invisible, but war rarely listens to plans. A distant glint flashes in the sun optics, maybe a scope, or a signal. Hayes pulls back from the periscope, his mind racing. If they've been spotted, they're already too late. Reverse. Slow, he commands. The tank groans as it begins to crawl backward, each inch feeling like a mile. No one breathes. No one speaks. Then, a thunderclap tears through the desert. The shell lands short, but close enough to shake the bones of the machine. Sand erupts like a geyser, pelting the hull. Contact, Lewis shouts. Driver, full reverse. Hayes snaps. Another shell screams overhead. Too close. They've been seen. Hayes grips the turret edge, forcing himself to stay calm. Training fights panic. Experience buries it. But something feels wrong. The enemy isn't firing to destroy them. They're adjusting, hunting. Why aren't they finishing us? Nolan blurts out. Hayes stares back through the scope. The shapes on the ridge are moving now. Not retreating. Advancing. Slow. Controlled. Like they want the American tank alive. A chill settles deep in Hayes' chest. This isn't a skirmish. It's a message. And somewhere beyond these dunes, something much larger has already begun. The tank shudders as another shell slams into the sand just meters away. The blast rattles every bolt, every nerve. Inside, the air is thick with all fumes and fear. Left, they're flanking left. Nolan shouts, his voice cracking. Hayes swings the periscope, heart pounding. The ridge is no longer empty. Dark silhouettes enemy tanks crawl over the crest like predators claiming ground. Their movement is deliberate, disciplined, not rushed, not desperate. Controlled. Traverse gun. 10 degrees left, Hayes orders, his tone sharp, steady. The turret groans as it turns. Metal scraping against metal echoes in the confined space. Target? Lewis asks. Hayes hesitates for a fraction of a second. They're too far, too exposed. One shot might give away everything. But waiting could be worse. Fire when ready. The cannon erupts with a deafening blast. The recoil slams through the tank, shaking dust from the ceiling. Hayes watches through the scope as the shell streaks across the desert. It lands just short. Damn it. Lewis mutters. Adjust elevation. Quick. Before they can fire again, a sharp metallic clang rings through the hull. Not a penetration but close enough. They're dialing us in. Nolan yells. Hayes feels it now the shift. This isn't just a fight. They're being tested. Smoke launchers, he commands. With a hiss, thick white smoke pours out around the tank, swallowing them in a cloud. Visibility drops to nothing. Driver, pivot right, then forward full throttle. The engine roars as the tank lunges through the smoke, blind and vulnerable. Tracks churn sand into chaos. For a moment, there is only noise, engine, metal, breathing, then silence. Too much silence. They burst out of the smoke screen and into open desert. No cover, no ridge, nothing. Hayes scans frantically. The enemy tanks are gone. Vanished. What? Where'd they go? Nolan whispers. Hayes doesn't answer. His eyes narrow, searching the horizon. Then he sees it. Far ahead another formation. Larger. Waiting. Not hiding this time. Positioned. Prepared. A line of armored vehicles stretching across the desert like a wall. Hayes feels his stomach drop. This was never about chasing one tank. They were being herded. Driven exactly where the enemy wanted them. Stop the tank, Hayes says quietly. Lewis hesitates. Sergeant, stop. The engine dies down. The tank sits still in the vast, exposed desert. For the first time since the shooting started. And no shells come. No movement. Just the distant line of enemy armor, silent and watching. Waiting. Hayes stares at them through the scope, a cold realization settling in. This isn't a battlefield. It's a stage. and they've just been placed at the center of it. The silence stretches thin, like a wire ready to snap. Inside the tank, no one speaks. The engine idles low. A quiet growl beneath the weight of something none of them can name yet. Hayes keeps his eye locked to the periscope. The enemy line hasn't moved. Dozens of armored vehicles sit across the horizon, evenly spaced, their guns angled but not firing. It's too precise, too clean. Why aren't they shooting? Nolan finally asks, his voice barely holding. Hayes exhales slowly. Because they don't need to. Lewis shifts below. That's supposed to make me feel better. It shouldn't. A flicker catches Hayes' eye movement from the center of the enemy line. One tank rolls forward, slow and deliberate, breaking formation. It advances alone, straight toward them. Hayes tracks it carefully. No turret swing, no muzzle flash, just a steady approach, like it has all the time in the world. Single vehicle advancing, Hayes says. Hold fire. Hold fire? Nolan snaps. Sarge, that's a sitting duck. That's an order. The words cut clean. The approaching tank closes the distance, its tracks grinding through sand, leaving deep scars behind it. Its armor is scarred, worn but not weak. This machine has seen combat, and survived it. At 200 yards, it stops. The desert falls quiet again. Hayes leans closer to the scope, straining to see details through heat, shimmer, and dust. Then, a hatch opens. A figure emerges slowly from the enemy tank. No weapon raised, no sudden movements. Just a man, standing tall against the sun. What the hell? Lewis murmurs. The figure raises one arm, not in surrender. In signal, Hayes feels something shift deep in his chest. This isn't a battlefield gesture. It's deliberate, calculated. A challenge. Do we fire? Nolan asks, almost pleading. Hayes doesn't answer right away. His mind races through possibilities. Trap, deception, psychological play, or something worse. The man atop the tank doesn't move. He simply stands there, exposed, as if daring them to act, waiting. Hayes grips the edge of the turret, tension crawling up his spine. If they fire, they start something. If they don't, they're already part of it. Sergeant, Lewis presses. Hayes makes his decision. Open hatch. The crew freezes. You serious? Nolan whispers. Hayes doesn't look away from the scope. If this is a message, we're going to hear it. Slowly, cautiously, Hayes pushes open the hatch. The desert wind rushes in, cold and sharp. He rises halfway out of the tank, eyes locked on the lone figure across the sand. For a brief moment, the war feels paused. 2 soldiers, 2 machines, a vast, empty desert between them. Then the man across the way lifts something small, metallic, and holds it high. It catches the sunlight, flashing bright. Hayes squints. Not a weapon, a radio transmitter. And suddenly, Hayes understands. This was never about destroying one tank. It was about being heard, and whatever comes next won't stay in this desert. The whine carries no sound, yet the moment feels louder than any battlefield. Hayes steadies himself halfway out of the hatch, one hand gripping the cold steel rim. Across the desert, the lone figure stands unmoving, arms still raised, the small radio transmitter glinting under the brutal sun. No sudden movements, no weapons drawn, just intent. Sergeant, this feels wrong, Lewis says from below, voice low, uneasy. Hayes doesn't answer. His eyes remain locked forward. The man on the enemy tank lowers the transmitter slowly, then brings it to his mouth. Even from this distance, Hayes can see it clearly. He's speaking, but not to them. A sharp crackle bursts through the tank's internal radio, unexpected, violent in the silence. The crew flinches. What the? Nolan snaps, scrambling to adjust the receiver. Static floods the channel. Then a voice cuts through. Calm, measured, speaking English. American Armored Unit, you are receiving this transmission. The words hit like a punch. Hayes' grip tightens. Identify yourself. Lewis shouts instinctively into the mic. No response to the question. The voice continues, unbothered. You have crossed into a restricted engagement zone. Your presence has been recorded. Hayes feels the air shift. This isn't a field officer. This is something else. Higher, calculated. Who is this? Hayes demands, leaning into the radio. A pause. Then, a witness. The word lingers, cold and deliberate. Hayes glances up. The man on the tank hasn't moved. Still speaking into the transmitter, still exposed, still calm. This engagement, the voice continues, will be the first, not the last. Nolan shakes his head. First of what? What are they talking about? Hayes already knows. Or at least, he feels it. This region is no longer isolated, the voice says. Actions taken here will carry beyond borders, beyond alliances. The message is precise. Every word chosen, every word meant to travel. You will return to your command, the voice continues, and you will report what you have seen. Lewis looks up sharply. They're letting us go. Hayes doesn't respond. His eyes stay fixed forward. Tell them, the voice says, quieter now, almost personal, that the next time we meet, we'll not speak. The transmission cuts. Silence crashed back in. The desert feels heavier now. Alive. The man atop the enemy tank lowers the transmitter. For a brief moment, he looks directly at Hayes. Even across the distance, it feels intentional. Then he disappears back inside the hatch. The tank reverses slowly, turning, retreating toward the distant armored line. No shots fired. No pursuit. Just withdrawal. Hayes lowers himself back into the hatch, his face tight and readable. Sergeant, Nolan whispers, what the hell just happened? Hayes stares ahead, the words echoing in his mind. The first. He reaches for the radio again, his voice steady but colder now. This is Sergeant Hayes. We have contact. A pause. Then, quietly, and it's bigger than we thought. The tank moves again but slower now. Not retreating. Not advancing. Just leaving. Tracks carve shallow lines through the sand as Hayes sits low inside the turret, headset pressed tight against his ears. The radio crackles with distant command chatter, fragmented and unclear. Repeat last contact confirmed. Coordinates. Static swallows the rest. Signals weak, Nolan mutters, adjusting dials with shaking hands. Hayes stares through the periscope, but the enemy line is gone. Nothing remains except wind and empty desert, like it never happened. But Hayes knows better. Keep trying, he says quietly. Lewis glances up. You really think Command's gonna believe this? Hayes doesn't answer right away, because he doesn't know. Back home, battles are numbers, positions, reports typed neatly onto paper. Not this. Not a deliberate encounter. Not a message delivered like a warning shot across history. They'll believe it, Hayes says finally, because they won't have a choice. The tank crests a low ridge, and the terrain shifts harder ground. Scattered rock, faint traces of old supply routes, signs of movement, recent movement. Hayes leans closer to the scope, tension rising again. Hold, he says. The tank slows. Their tracks, not theirs. Fresh, heavy, convoy size. Lewis exhales slowly. That's not a patrol. No, Hayes agrees. It's not. He scans further, and then he sees it. Far in the distance, barely visible through dust and heat, columns of vehicles. Not tanks. Transport. Dozens of them. Moving in organized lines. Toward the interior. What are they carrying? Nolan asks. Hayes watches carefully. Covered cargo. Uniform spacing. Escort vehicles flanking both sides. Military precision. But not frontline deployment. Something else. Supplies? Lewis suggests. Hayes shakes his head slowly. No. He's seen supply convoys before. They don't move like this. They don't get protected like this. This is something being moved carefully, deliberately, like it matters more than anything else in the desert. A chill runs through him. Radio still dead, he asks. Nothing but static. Hayes makes a decision. Driver angle us closer. Slow. We don't get spotted. The tank shifts direction, moving along a low ridge for cover. Every movement is controlled, cautious. Below them, the convoy continues, unaware, or pretending to be. As they draw closer, details sharpen. Canvas covers, sealed crates, and then something that makes Hayes' breath catch. Markings. Not standard military. Not American. Not anything he recognizes. Sergeant, Nolan whispers, what is that? Hayes doesn't answer, because he's staring at one crate in particular, where the canvas has slipped just enough to reveal metal underneath. Smooth, cylindrical, too precise, too clean, and guarded like it could change the war. Hayes feels it deep in his gut. This isn't just a movement of supplies. This is the reason they were allowed to live, and whatever is inside those crates is meant to be used soon. The convoy rolls on, unaware or uncaring that it's being watched. Hayes doesn't blink. Through the periscope, the image sharpens with every passing second. The cylindrical object rests inside its crate like something engineered, not manufactured in haste. No dents, no rough edges, precision. Those aren't shells, Lewis mutters under his breath. Too clean. Hayes nods slightly. Artillery is crude compared to this. Built for impact, not perfection. This is something else. Range, Hayes asks, 800 yards. Maybe less, Nolan replies, adjusting his sight nervously. Too close for comfort. Too far to act without consequence. Hayes studies the convoy formation again. Lead escorts, rear guards, side vehicles keeping tight spacing. Disciplined, protected, important. They wanted us to see this, Hayes says quietly. Lewis looks up. You think that whole show back there, the tanks, the message, was to bring us here? Hayes finished. Silence settles inside the tank. No one argues, because it makes sense. Too much sense. Then why not just tell us? Nolan asks. Hayes exhales slowly. Because this way, we believe it. Below, one of the convoy trucks hits uneven ground. The canvas covering shifts again just for a moment. Long enough. Hayes leans in hard. There are more cylinders. Not one, not two. Rows of them. Each identical. Each secured like a weapon. Jesus. Nolan whispers. Hayes feels his pulse in his throat now. This isn't a test shipment. It's deployment. Radio. Now, Hayes snaps. Nolan twists the dial again. Desperate. Static. Nothing but static. They're jamming us, Lewis says. Hayes clenches his jaw. Of course they are. They want this seen but not shared. Not yet. The convoy begins to shift formation, preparing to change direction. Deeper into the desert, away from any known routes. Time is running out. Hayes makes the call. Load you round. Lewis freezes. Sarge, if we fire, they know we're here. Hayes cuts in. This isn't about surprise anymore. The loader moves quickly now, hand steady despite the tension. Shell locked, gun ready. Hayes tracks the lead vehicle. One shot. That's all they'll get. One chance to disrupt whatever this is, or confirm something far worse. Target lead escort, Hayes orders. The turret aligns. Breath held. Finger on the trigger. Then, the convoy stops. All at once, every vehicle, every engine, dead still. Hayes' finger tightens. They know, Nolan whispers. Before Hayes can react, a flash erupts from the far ridge. Not from the convoy. From beyond it, a distant explosion blooms massive, controlled, unnatural. The ground trembles, even from miles away. Hayes freezes. That wasn't artillery. That wasn't a mine. It was something else entirely. And suddenly, the convoy doesn't matter anymore, because whatever just detonated was bigger. The shockwave arrives seconds after the flash. It rolls across the desert like a living thing lifting sand, bending heat, rattling the tank's hull with a deep, unnatural force. Hayes grips the periscope as the world outside distorts. Impact. What was that? Nolan shouts, voice swallowed by the roar. Hayes doesn't answer, because he doesn't know. But he's seen explosions before. Artillery, fuel dumps, even ammunition trains. None of them look like this. The blast column climbs higher into the sky, thick and rising. Not dissipating like smoke but building, folding into itself. Controlled, deliberate, engineered. Lewis stares upward through the open hatch. That wasn't an accident. No, Hayes says quietly. It wasn't. Below them, the convoy reacts not with panic, but precision. Engines restart in unison. Vehicles pivot. Formation tightens. They're not retreating. They're accelerating. Whatever that was their signal, Hayes says. Nolan looks up, eyes wide. Signal for what? Hayes watches the convoy surge forward, faster now, more aggressive. For the next phase, the distant blast continues to rise, a dark pillar against the pale sky. Too large, too stable, too wrong. Hayes feels something settle in his chest, a realization heavier than fear. This wasn't a demonstration. It was proof. They wanted us to see it all, he mutters. The message, the convoy, and now this. Radio still dead, he asks. Completely jammed, Nolan replies. We're cut off. Hayes nods slowly. Then they're on their own. He makes a decision fast. Driver, get us down there. We follow the convoy. Lewis snaps his head up. Follow. Sarge. After that, we don't follow, Hayes corrects. We lose them. The tank lurches forward, descending the ridge carefully but quickly. Sand and rock grind beneath the tracks as they close the distance. Below, the convoy pushes deeper into the desert. Dust trails rising behind it like smoke from a moving fire. Hayes tracks the lead vehicles again. Those cylinders. That blast. This is connected. It has to be. Keep us behind that dust, Hayes orders. We stay invisible. The tank dips into the low ground, using terrain to mask its movement. Every second feels borrowed. Ahead, the convoy begins to split, sections peeling off in different directions. Why are they dividing? Nolan asks. Hayes stares, trying to read the pattern. Distribution, he says. The word lands hard. Multiple targets. Multiple destinations. Whatever they're carrying, it's not meant for one strike. It's meant for many. The scale of it hits Hayes all at once. Not a battle. Not a mission. A chain reaction. He leans into the radio again, knowing it's useless but trying anyway. Command, this is Hayes. Do you copy? Only static answers. Outside, the desert stretches endlessly, and somewhere ahead, those cylinders are being carried closer to wherever they're meant to end this, or begin something worse. The desert fractures into paths. From the ridge, Hayes watches the convoy split into separate columns, each one moving with purpose, each one carrying part of the same secret. Dust trails carve the landscape into lines of intent, not chaos. Design. They're scattering, Nolan says, trying to keep his voice steady. No, Hayes replies. They're placing pieces. He tracks one column veering east, smaller, faster. Another pushes deeper south, heavier vehicles struggling over uneven ground. The third is different, slower, more guarded. Take us after the center group, Hayes orders. Lewis hesitates only a second before turning the tank. That's the one you think matters. Hayes doesn't look away. That's the one they don't want touched. The tank moves low through a shallow basin, staying beneath the horizon line. Every movement is calculated now. One mistake, one flash of metal in the sun and they're finished. Above them, the sky still carries the scar of the explosion. A dark column hangs in place, unmoving, like it refuses to fade. Hayes feels it pressing on him. Time is running. They crest a small rise and freeze. Ahead, the central convoy has halted again. But this time, it isn't alone. A structure rises from the desert floor hidden until now by terrain and distance. Concrete, angular, camouflaged against the sand. What is that? Nolan whispers. Hayes narrows his eyes. It's not a base. Not fully. Too small for command. Too reinforced for storage. A bunker, no more than that. An installation. The convoy begins to feed into it, one vehicle at a time, disappearing behind reinforced blast doors partially buried in the earth. Lewis exhales slowly. They're taking whatever's in those crates. Underground. Hayes nods. Protected. Hidden. Ready. A chill crawls through him. If those cylinders are weapons, this is where they're armed. Radio, Hayes says again. Quieter now. Nolan doesn't even respond. They both know it's useless. Hayes watches as another truck rolls forward. The canvas shifts again in the wind. A cylinder is fully exposed this time. Closer now. Clear. Smooth metal. Sealed casing. And along its side, markings. Symbols. Not just military codes. Warnings. Hazard. Containment. Hayes feels his breath catch. Not explosives. Something worse. Something that doesn't just destroy. Something that spreads. Chemical. Lewis murmurs, the word barely forming. Hayes doesn't confirm it, but he doesn't deny it either. Below, the final trucks begin entering the bunker. Once they're inside, whatever this is becomes untouchable, hidden, prepared, deployed when no one sees it coming. Hayes' hand tightens into a fist. If they walk away now, this disappears, and the next time it appears, it won't be a warning. It'll be too late. He looks at the bunker, then at his crew. A single decision hangs in the air. Strike now, or let the world burn later. The desert holds its breath. Hayes doesn't move at first. His eyes stay fixed on the bunker entrance as the last convoy truck inches forward, its engine rumbling low, heavy with purpose. Once it disappears inside, the door will close, and whatever sits in those cylinders will vanish beneath the earth. Untouchable, unstoppable. Sergeant, Nolan says, voice tight. We're out of time. Hayes knows. Every instinct in him screams caution. One tank against a fortified installation. No support, no communication, no escape. But the voice from earlier echoes in his mind. The first, not the last. This is how it begins. Not with armies, not with declarations. With something hidden, something silent, something that spreads before anyone understands it. Hayes makes his decision. Load armor piercing. Lewis doesn't argue this time. The shell slides into place with a solid, final click. Target, he asks. Hayes watches the bunker entrance. Reinforced doors. Thick concrete. Designed to withstand direct hits, but not yet sealed. Not yet locked. The doorway, Hayes says. Right as it closes, Nolan inhales sharply. If we miss, we don't miss. The tank inches forward, just enough to clear the ridge. The barrel lowers slightly, aligning with the dark opening where the last truck begins to disappear. Distance tightens. Angle sharpens. Hayes slows his breathing. Everything narrows to a single point. Steady, he murmurs. The bunker doors begin to move. Massive slabs of reinforced steel grinding inward. Seconds. Just seconds. Fire. The cannon erupts. The shell cuts through the desert air, screaming toward the narrowing gap, and strikes. A violent explosion tears through the entrance as the shell penetrates, deep inside before detonating. Fire bursts outward, followed by a shockwave that rips through the structure. The ground trembles. The doors jam halfway closed. Then, a second explosion ignites beneath the surface. Deeper, stronger. The bunker convulses as something inside reacts violently. Flames punch through vents and seams, followed by a thick plume rising fast into the sky. Direct hit, Nolan shouts. But Hayes isn't celebrating, because the explosion doesn't behave like ammunition. It spreads, rolling outward in a low, creeping cloud that clings to the ground before rising slowly, unnaturally. Lewis stares. That's not fire. Hayes feels it, the same cold realization as before. They didn't just destroy it. They triggered it. Move, now. Hayes roars. The tank reverses hard, tracks tearing into the earth as the cloud begins to expand from the shattered bunker. Behind them, The desert is changing. The air itself feels wrong. The plume rises higher, darker, carried by the wind, carried beyond the battlefield. Hayes grabs the radio one last time, knowing it may never reach anyone. This is Sergeant Hayes. We engage the target. Static crackles violently. Then silence. He looks back just once at the growing cloud swallowing the horizon.